Oh my god, we're starting!
Brainlord is not exactly the kind of name that you would expect for an action role-playing game on the Super Nintendo. Another classic Enix game that probably nobody's ever heard of, and nobody ever will, because it seems to have stayed in the Super Nintendo generation and hasn't been brought back for any virtual consoles in a sense. And that is our topic of discussion for this week's Game Club. I'm Bon Bolapti, your host as always, and this time I am joined by Xeiphyer.
Hello!
This was the game that he recommended I play weeks ago for one of these things, so I said, yes, we're going to do it, and you're going to join me. And it was kind of surprising to me that this was also an Enix game.
Yeah, we're kind of doing lots of Enix games.
Oh man, there's so many.
There is, and I never really played any of them.
Yeah, no, that's the beauty of this kind of thing. First off, I kind of wanted to talk about Brainlord and how similar it feels to Soul Blazer in a way.
Soul Blazer, The Legend of Zelda.
That too. But just because I'm fresh off of playing Soul Blazer and I'm playing this game, I'm feeling the similarities between the two in how it plays. Not so much the kind of game that it is, you're not killing things and unlocking people and making things live again. But the gameplay mechanic is just kind of, yeah, like I said, it's similar. Especially down to the magic ability that you have.
Yeah.
What Soul Blazer had was this old dude that turned into a magic ball and would just kind of be your magic spell for you. And in this one, which I think is actually really neat, and one of my favorite little gimmicks about this game, is that you get these gems that apparently have spirits inside them. And they seem to just cast magic at their own will.
Yeah, they're invincible, and they just kind of chill on your shoulder, basically. And you get that fire imp, and he just throws fireballs at dudes. And he levels up, and he throws huge fireballs at the end. It's awesome.
Yeah. And there's so many, and it's kind of interesting, because at the very beginning of the game, there's this guy that sells you all these different gems. With all these different spirits.
I spent 2 hours grinding money in the first zone to buy the most expensive one.
Oh yeah? Which one did you get?
I could not tell you what it's called, but it costs 32,000, and you get this it's basically a bulldog, a flying magical pixie bulldog.
Oh yeah?
And he just runs into dudes and kills them. It's the best.
That sounds exciting. I just stuck with the beginner fire imp because I wasn't this is the first time I've played Brainlord. You've probably played it multiple times.
At least once.
At least once. So this being your second time, that makes it multiple times.
yeah, exactly. And it's funny how the last time I played this game, I was probably 8 or 9 years old.
Oh yeah.
And it's funny going back to play this game and remembering so many things about this game because the puzzles in this game are very challenging. Yeah. And when I was 8 or 9, this game took me months to beat. I remember getting so frustrated.
That I wanted to bring that up as well because that was another thing that made this game really interesting and probably the reason why it's called Brainlord. I don't know.
Yeah.
The puzzles are kind of, it's strange to have these kind of puzzles in a game like this, which makes it all the more interesting and more difficult to understand.
Yeah, there's this really weird mix of you're just killing dudes and picking up loot and stuff, and then you get into the dungeons and there's actual puzzles in here. Yeah. And it's not just push this thing onto a switch. Well, sometimes it is.
Sometimes, yeah.
But it's you have to restart rooms multiple times because you got stuck on these puzzles.
Mm-hmm.
When I was playing my playthrough yesterday, I actually had to go look something up because I could not figure out the puzzle.
Oh, that happened to me more than a couple of times. Especially, you're further in the game than I am. I just beat the tower this morning, and I'm at the ruins. So, maybe if we feel like it, we'll do multiple podcasts of Brainlord. More than one Game Club podcast about it. Cause,
that second dungeon's awesome.
Yeah, and it looks pretty awesome for what I've played through it so far. But One of the puzzles that really threw me for a loop was the one where you're in the big room with the 2 rocks and the 3 orange balls that roll at you.
Yep.
And like the big open space with the treasure chest there, and I'm like, I couldn't figure it out for the life of me. Like,
Yeah.
what the hell are you supposed to do? And I looked
It's
up
oh, sorry.
facts.
God.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
And I looked at facts, and they were giving me the wrong kind of instructions.
Yep.
But then there was like this thing on the wall by the door that's like, you have to use magic. And I'm like, okay, I only have 2 magic spells, and one of them doesn't seem to work. So like I'm running around the room with magic missile, and suddenly the balls start attacking the treasure chest. I'm like, is that what I'm supposed to do?
Oh yeah.
What's the point of these balls? Like, what the hell is going on here?
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of those puzzles are not like they're not clean. Like it's not like, oh, I can just kind of move these blocks around until I get it.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those are like with those orange balls that basically heat seek on you when you get near them. You have to like position them in such a way that it'll roll over the switch right as you're walking into the door.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you will not be able to get through.
Those are crazy puzzles.
Really devious.
I wonder how much harder it's going to get further in you go.
It gets pretty good.
We should actually probably talk about what this game is, or like the plot of it, right?
Yeah.
So basically, like most video games in that era, is that you're
Pretty unique storyline.
Yeah, pretty unique storyline, but like the main character is always like you're the boy.
Yeah. His canon name is Ramir.
Yeah. But you can change it to whatever you like, so I called myself Bond for obvious reasons. So yeah, Ramir's father, who was a dragon warrior, had to like go and fight some dragons that were terrorizing a village, but he never returned. So then it's like quote unquote modern time, or like present time, and he's out to be an adventurer like everybody else.
Yeah. It's actually kind of interesting. There's like a weird thing in that game where it seems like everyone, whatever like class you're born into is what you're stuck doing.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's like a kid who complains about having to clean sheets all day because he was born into like the innkeeper's household or whatever. So I wish I'd been born under the blacksmith household.
Yeah.
So I guess you're just stuck being a dragon warrior.
But
it's like pretty buff looking, so.
And with that respect too, like the beginning of the game, you're introduced to all of these other characters that are like basically going along with you on your journey, because they're all doing the same thing, but they just kind of like pop up in rooms here and there and move the story along.
Yeah, and like in that first dungeon, you have to go ask for one of the guys' help. Like you have to go find him in the earlier part of the dungeon. He can stand on a switch for you.
Yeah, I like the way that they did that too. It's just like, oh, I'm a little bit of a klutz, so you go ahead.
Yeah. It's interesting that you have NPCs that are in the dungeons with you,
mm-hmm.
kind of giving you hints and helping you out and stuff.
Especially as many NPCs as there are.
Yeah.
And it just kind of makes me curious as to what their role specifically is. They're like, are they just going to wander around with you and just be there to be helpful hints, or at some point are they actually going to participate in fights with you? I think that would be really
yeah, and some stuff happens with those characters. Like there is kind of story between them and with them.
Oh yeah.
And they certainly take a pretty interesting role in the later dungeons and the later story. But yeah, they're pretty awesome.
Yeah, no, it's exciting. I'm looking forward to it. So let's talk about where we are.
Sure.
I just made it to the ruins, which is apparently a futuristic type ruins.
Yeah.
As one of the NPCs kind of pointed out, it's like, oh, they used to use this place for testing things a long time ago.
Yeah, so it's one of those games where it's like weird future ancients, but now everyone just uses swords and shields again.
Do you think that that's just like a really popular setting for Japanese developers to do?
Certainly does seem to be that way. Like pretty much everything is like that, I think.
Exactly. Like even still in modern games, they still have that kind of thing going on. Even as something as bad as the Tales series.
Yeah. But it's a good excuse to kill robots with swords.
That is true. I guess they really like doing that kind of stuff a lot. And yeah, so like this kind of game is no different. But you are bit on. So if
Yeah.
I'm at the ruins compared to you are, how further do I have to go? Is it just?
Basically, I'm one dungeon ahead of you.
Oh, okay.
After the ruins, which is much longer than the first dungeon.
Oh man.
Yeah, it's tough. I think there's probably only 5 dungeons in the whole game,
Oh
but
really?
they get pretty long after the first one.
I guess they'd have to. Really.
Yeah, they definitely encourage you to use the items to teleport back to town and resupply, and then jump back into the dungeon.
Mm-hmm. There's the way they put it that if you die, you lose half of your money.
Yeah, it sucks. I died once, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I hate this game. I lost all my money. It was terrible."
But it's good. That's actually one of the. You could say that this game is probably one of the early instances of quick travel.
Yes, yeah. I actually think this game is really ahead of its time in a lot of ways,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you compare it to like Legend of Zelda, where like you don't get a game over when you die, which is nice, and you have fast travel, and there's loot dropping from enemies, and you have like minions that are leveling up, and it's really interesting. And there's like a pretty complex game.
Yeah. Then there are things that I just kind of feel are a little bit bad about it. Like the menu system is kind of.
Yeah,
Uh,
when you have to equip new items, and you have to when you're buying like healing items like cheese,
mm-hmm.
you have to buy them one at a time. You have to like keep talking to the NPC each time and
Yeah,
buying.
that's so annoying that they don't stack because that menu, when like what all your items are, it really takes its time to scroll through.
Yeah, it's a little slow.
Especially when you're putting on something as strange as the X-ray goggles. See,
Yeah.
that doesn't make any sense, that item, because it's like, yeah, they're X-ray goggles, but they're really just a map.
It's just a map. I don't know how those work. You put them on, it just brings up a map of the floor.
Yeah. Like, that's all it does. And you can't keep the X-ray goggles on and just, like,
Nope.
keep the map to the side or something.
Nope.
It takes up your precious time.
Yeah, I pretty much never use it. I just
Yeah.
wander around.
Because you don't need them. Like, if you know where things are, you know where things are. It's not a complex thing to get around
Yeah.
in that game.
Although these games or this game has a lot of secrets in the dungeons.
Yeah.
There's lots of pits and stuff where if you jump down in just the right spot, you'll fall into a treasure room,
Oh,
or
really?
you can like push this wall and go through it and stuff like that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that second dungeon has lots of that stuff.
Oh, man. Now I'm going to be using those X-ray goggles all the time.
And you can get a cool flail and you can like spin it around you. It's awesome. It's wicked.
Sweet. Sweet. But let's talk about where you are.
Yeah.
Because
so,
this is probably like the best part of Brainlord.
yeah, and I totally forgot about this till I started playing it again. I just like lost it. So the first town you start out in is called Arcs, which is whatever.
Yep.
And once you finish those first 2 dungeons, you head to the second town, which is called Toronto. Yep, it's awesome. I'm like, they must not have known. It must be a weird translation. I don't know what the story behind that is, but the magical fantasy city of Toronto.
Wow. That's
It's
amazing.
great.
Have you ever been to Toronto before?
Only in Brainlord. I assume real life Toronto is just like it.
Oh.
Up by the inn, the weaponsmith.
You go check out Second City.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, that part's great.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. I've only ever been to Toronto once when I was a child, but it was like at the airport when my dad was going to a bottled water convention.
What?
I know, strange, right? But like he deals in the bottled water business.
What? Really?
Yeah, he's got 2 businesses. One is electrician, the other one is bottled water, which is kind of crazy if you put the 2 together, right? 'Cause it's
That's a
kinda
dangerous combination.
But
Don't use my products at the same time, please. Thank you.
but we on the way to Montreal, which where the convention was, we had some. What's the is layover the proper word to use?
Yeah, layover,
Yeah,
right? Stopover, layover.
Yeah, we had some layover in the airport in Toronto, and that place was huge. And they had this big window that was overlooking the city, and as a child I was like, oh my god, I want to wander around this place. It looks so cool.
Probably have the best weapons and armor there.
Probably! Give
Your
me my quest!
Did your dad just have a briefcase full of water bottles?
No.
That's what I imagine. Just like one pen, just like a row of water bottles strapped in.
If only. But it was one of the things that was actually kind of funny is that he started like years ago. He started selling bottled water in the size of Mickey's.
Nice. In the shape of a Mickey?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Sneak a Mickey of water into the bar.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm staying hydrated.
It's always a good time. But yeah, so like Toronto is just crazy to see that in a video game.
Yeah, very strange. And like reading everything they tell you about that place in the game is super funny.
Oh, yeah? Like what?
Yeah, it's like the weather in Toronto is always nice because they're near a volcano.
Oh, if only that were true.
And there's an evil goblin which is like taking over the city of Toronto.
Oh, yeah?
Actually, I don't want to spoil anything, but Toronto definitely gets attacked by giant sandworms later.
Oh, no.
Yeah, something to look forward to.
I am looking forward to that. We are probably definitely going to have to do a second podcast about Brain Lords just so I can get through this game some more.
You should. It's great. It only gets better.
Oh, man.
And those puzzles in that second dungeon will piss you off.
Oh, I'm looking forward to that then. Yay! They're bad enough as it is. So, like, on the subject of like the secret locations and stuff like that, there's sometimes the NPCs kind of point something out a little bit deliberately, but there's nothing you can do about it, which kind of annoys me.
Mm-hmm.
Like the lady in the green. This is before you even fight the first boss. She's basically standing in front of the secret entrance that you go through after you defeat the boss. And she's standing there and she's all like, oh, there's something weird about this wall. I'm going to stand here and inspect it.
Uh-huh.
Why don't you just let me, with the brute force, attack the wall?
Hello, I'm the main character. Out of the way, please. I need the treasure. Yeah,
Don't
and
mind.
I can't remember. I think you can go back there later and there might be something there. I do not remember, but I think there's a secret there.
Yeah, there was something that was pointing out, like a sign on the wall that was saying that there's, if you go the detour, then you'll find riches.
Mm.
I didn't give myself enough time to do that, because I had to get through at least the first boss before starting this podcast.
Yep.
We don't waste any time.
One other weird thing about this game is that you can jump,
Yeah,
which is really strange.
that one was... I think what makes it strange is the depth perception of the environment
Yeah.
is very confusing to understand. Cause
Like when you're in those mountains on the way to the first dungeon.
yeah.
And I remember getting stuck there as a kid, and I was like, well, where do I go? I can't go this way. It's like, oh, you can just jump up these hills. These ones are hills. The ones beside it are mountains that you cannot go up.
Even though they look completely the same.
Yep.
Which is just ridiculous. But yeah, no, that's the jumping definitely adds to the puzzles, at least with all the jumping puzzles. Like everybody's favorite thing about old games is jumping puzzles.
Yeah, it's a jumping puzzle platformer.
This game definitely has plenty of them.
In the second dungeon, they have platforms that like disappear and reappear constantly.
Oh yeah.
And you have to do a lot of really tough jumping. But I don't know. It's okay. For some reason, I don't mind it, even though I totally hate any kind of platforming in any game ever.
Yeah. That's true. The first dungeon was actually just guilty of jumping on platforms that would move as soon as you landed on them.
Yeah. Like they're not, some of them are not timed well.
Yeah.
What I noticed is that they don't start moving until they come on screen.
Oh, yeah.
So if you don't like show them all at the same time, they're not lined up.
Oh.
Yeah, and I think like their patterns are kind of off balance, so they eventually kind of line up.
Yeah, that would have been useful knowledge. That one last bit before the boss in the first dungeon.
Yeah.
These two platforms were completely out of sync, and I had to sit there for a long while.
Yeah, it definitely feels like they have a lot of cool ideas, but they have maybe not perfected all the ideas behind this dungeon crawling.
Mm-hmm.
They took that and they combined with Square to make Amazing Final Fantasy 13, right?
Yeah, the amazing, the fantastic Final Fantasy 13. So, this being a Super Nintendo game that it is, and, you know, like, given the era of getting just anybody that has even the slightest understanding of Japanese to localize and translate these games, it's definitely some very
spotty
very
translation,
strange, pieces of dialogue. One in particular was when you're on the fourth floor of the tower. You look at the sign that says something like something about being like, oh, you're going to be, you'd have to be a strong warrior or something like that. And then immediately after that, it says, you will understand that line someday.
Yeah, not likely. Yeah, I can't tell if some of it's meant to just be kind of maybe old-timey or like weirdly written, like to be confusing and cryptic on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a stone plaque in a dungeon. Maybe it's old school.
Maybe.
There's a puzzle in the second dungeon which is worded very poorly. That was the puzzle I had to look up. And then it made sense afterwards. It was actually a really good puzzle. And after I figured it out, I was like, oh, I'm stupid.
Well, that's what the beauty of the signs are, is that they just give you like these really bizarre, weird, like kind of vague hints.
Yeah.
Written by children, almost in a sense.
Yeah.
Like with things like, oh, you have to move these blocks. Like, okay.
How did you find the puzzles in that first dungeon? Like, there's the one where there's like, you have to press like 3 switches down, but you have like 2 stones and like some like rolling metal balls.
That one was confusing because there was 4 of those things, or no,
Yeah.
like there was 6 altogether, but you had to find the right combination.
Yeah.
I definitely had to play around with those blocks a couple of times because there's only so much that you can do with the rolly balls because they just, you know,
They roll to the end.
Yeah.
And the other thing is you can't pull anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
So once something's like up against the wall, like you can only move it like up or down or left or right, depending on what wall it is. You can't get it off that wall though.
Which is even more frustrating because there was way too many times where I found myself at these puzzles where I had to move these blocks close to the wall, and if I got it wrong, then I had to like leave the room and come back.
Yep. Yeah, they're like is just enough space to solve these puzzles. You don't get a lot of breathing room on them.
But that that boss in the first dungeon was actually kind of interesting. If it wasn't for the fact that it was just like this giant bug that all it did was run away from you.
Yeah, you gotta like try and scare it and then smack it as it runs by you.
Yeah, then it like spat out all these other like little insects.
I died a few times on that part.
I managed to not die. I was kind of happy that I got it at my first try because I had all this cheese, and I had a mirror that lets you revive.
Really? I didn't find one of those yet.
Yeah, I think I managed to stumble upon it out of chance because I found myself just wandering around this game more than going on a set path, and I stumbled upon a lot of treasures that way, which I think I guess is the fun way to play it. Like, screw that X-ray goggles.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And there's a lot of hidden treasure to find all over the place.
Mm-hmm. Definitely more of that game to look forward to, but sadly that's as far as I've gotten.
Yeah, and I'm not much further. The game is deviously tough. Things hit you pretty hard. You gotta spend all your money on cheese.
It is. And it's kind of nice that they also give you the mechanic to actually block things, but that shield can only go so far. You get a shield for 50 hits, and right now it's sitting at 32 for me, and I'm going, jeez.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's nice enough to block these hits, because that little underground dungeon on the way to the second temple, I guess I should say, like the ruins.
Yeah.
With like those gross-looking men and those giant white scorpions.
Mm-hmm.
That proved to be very useful because those things hurt.
And it also really depends what weapon you're using, because there's different types of weapons you can equip.
That is also true.
Which is another kind of interesting thing. And like, you get that axe, and the axe can break like wood and pots and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And you can go around and smash everything in town and find some items in there.
Oh, I never thought of that way. I only knew it that I had to break apart these rocks to get through the...
Yeah, it's almost kind of like Pokemon in some spots where you need to have like a certain skill or a certain weapon to progress to certain paths.
Mm-hmm. But like always, my problem that they have with the axe, I feel like they have this kind of problem with most old video games, is that the range of the axe is just so
Just
bad
terrible.
that I never want to use it.
Just terrible. They're
Even
really strong though.
yeah,
Very strong.
it's like +5 attack as opposed to my +2 sword and bow and arrow that I have right now.
Yeah.
I'd want to use it all the time, but I get hit just as much as I hit the other person.
Yep. Yeah, you got to get really good at hitting people. It's like the frames. You got to get just the right frame with that axe.
Well, you know what? I think we're definitely going to have to revisit Brainlord some other time.
Yeah, I got to do a part 2. Beat that game.
Who knows when it's going to be? It's definitely not going to be next week, though, because I want to have something in between to make you look forward to part 2 of Brainlord.
Yeah, exactly. And give us time to beat that game. It's pretty tough.
Yeah, please give us time to beat that game, because it is, like I've said, surprisingly tough. Especially for an old Enix game, how I kind of felt like most of their games back then were pretty easy.
Yeah.
Soul Blazer, ridiculously easy till the last boss. ActRaiser, surprisingly easy game. ActRaiser 2, not so much. But you see, like they kind of they made a lot of accessible games back in the day.
Yeah.
Compared to
Where's my Brainlord 2?
Yeah.
Square Enix?
It's like
why?
It's like they had their Dragon Quest, which was their hardcore thing.
Yeah.
And then everything else on the side was just like, here's this fun little game that we made while you wait for your next Dragon Quest game.
Yeah, pretty much.
But yeah, definitely look forward to part 2 some other time. Like I said at the beginning of the podcast, though, if you do want to get your hands on this, the legal way, I'm going to put it that way, it only exists as a Super Nintendo game. There is no, as far as I know, there's been no evidence of it being in virtual consoles or online stores and stuff like that for you to go ahead and
Yeah,
buy.
you cannot get this game anywhere.
So if you luck out finding it at a used game store, or maybe you can even import it from Japan somewhere. I mean, like, it is a lot of dialogue, but the game
you might have
is...
to look up the hints for
Yeah.
those puzzles, but you totally could.
You have to look it up yourself, but for the most part, it's a pretty easy game to understand because it is an action RPG.
Yep.
And those can go a long way without you reading a word of English or a word of anything.
Did you guys know Nintendo Power gave this game a 3.525 out of 5?
And that means that it's an okay game at best.
The 3 digits they had to go on that. It wasn't a 3.53. That's too good for this game.
It's too good for this game. Well, Electronic Gaming Monthly actually gave it a little bit better of a score. It's like they care about games.
Yeah. Oh, man, I miss EGM.
I miss them too. You know, I think, is Game Informer the only magazine that's still around?
Pretty much.
Oh, man.
Never read it. Maybe I should.
Well, no, wait. EGM is back, isn't it? Well, they tried being back. I don't
They
know if they're
they
still
came back and they started doing print run again.
Yeah.
That lasted like 3 issues, and then they could not meet any demand. They had they had no demand, and the people that did subscribe for 6 months just stopped getting magazines,
Yeah.
which was kind of sketchy.
Sad times. Yeah, I heard that whole thing was a mess trying to get it back up.
Yeah.
Well, it's the time we live in. All the good things do no longer get reprinted or exist, so good luck trying to find Brainlord.
Yeah. Good luck.
And see you next podcast. Thanks for joining me, Xeiphyer.
Thanks for having me.
We'll look forward to talking more about Brainlord some other time. And, another game that strikes both of our fancies, we'll talk about it as well.
Original Front Mission. Yes.
Oh, it's on. I would definitely love to play that game again. All right, see you guys next week.
Yep.